You ever feel a car just give up on its personality? I had this old truck back in the day, a real beast, but one Tuesday it decided it didn't want to go straight anymore. It had a wandering spirit. I was fighting that steering wheel like I was wrestling a greased alligator just to stay in my own lane.
A greased alligator? Tiger? That sounds less like a wandering spirit and more like a safety hazard. I'm guessing you weren't exactly checking your tire pressure every Sunday back then.
I was young and thought if the engine turned over, the job was done. But that truck taught me that the chassis is really the unsung hero. We spend all our time talking about horsepower and torque, and we forget that if the steering linkage is a mess, all that power is just going to drive you into a ditch more efficiently.
Well, today we're actually getting under the car. We're deep diving into suspension and steering troubleshooting. And honestly, it's about time because my car has started making a clunking sound every time I hit a pothole that sounds like a skeleton falling down a flight of stairs.
That's a vivid image. Sounds like your strut mounts might be waving goodbye. Before we diagnose your musical skeleton, we should probably lay out the landscape. Most people don't realize how much of a partnership there is between the steering and the suspension. They're like a comedy duo. If one's off the beat, the whole show falls apart. We've basically got two main camps in the modern world. You've got your short, long arm, or SLA suspension, which you'll find on a lot of rear-wheel drive rigs and trucks. It uses two control arms, looks a bit like a wishbone if you squint at it. The trick there is the upper arm is shorter, which keeps your tires from scrubbing or sliding outwards when you hit a bump.
And the other camp is the McPherson strut, right? That's what I've got in my compact. It looks way simpler than the wishbone setup.
Simple is the word. It's light, tight, and perfect for front-wheel drive cars where space is at a premium. You've got your coil spring and your shock absorber living in one single housing. But because it's doing two jobs at once, when it goes south, it takes the whole neighborhood with it.
So when the skeleton starts rattling, it's likely that strut?
Could be. But troubleshooting isn't just about throwing parts at a noise, it's about physics. I once spent 3 days trying to fix a vibration in a customer's steering wheel. I replaced the tie rods, I balanced the tires twice. I was about ready to perform an exorcism on the front axle. Turn out, the guy had a massive chunk of dried mud stuck to the inside of his rim. It threw the centrifugal force into a tailspin.
Wait, so the master craftsman was defeated by a clump of dirt?
Humility is the first tool you should buy, Alex. It's cheaper than a torque wrench and you'll use it more often. It reminded me that you always start with the basics. Newton's laws aren't just for textbooks. Inertia and friction are the bosses of the shop. If a wheel's out of balance, that energy has to go somewhere, and usually it goes right into your palms through the steering column.
Okay, let's talk about the steering side of that partnership. You mentioned wrestling gators with your old truck. Was that a recirculating ball system or the rack and pinion we see everywhere now?
That old tank had the recirculating ball. It's a heavy-duty setup. Lots of linkages, a pitman arm, an idler arm. It feels a bit more disconnected, like you're suggesting a direction to the car rather than demanding it. Modern rack and pinion is much more point and shoot. The pinion gear sits on the end of your steering shaft and walks along a flat rack. It's direct, it's honest, and it's a lot easier to troubleshoot because there are fewer joints to go floppy.
So if my steering feels, is it going to turn? Loose? Where do I start looking? If I'm under the car, what am I actually poking at?
You start with the tie rod ends. They're the hands of the steering system. If the boots are cracked and the grease has turned into something resembling gritty cake frosting, you're in trouble. I like to have someone wiggle the steering wheel while I'm underneath. Car on stands, obviously, and I just watch those joints. If there's even a hair of movement in the joint before the wheel moves, that's your wandering spirit right there.
And what about power steering? I feel like that's the first thing people blame when the steering gets heavy. Oh, must be the pump.
People love to blame the pump because it's the loudest part of the system when it's unhappy. It whines like a toddler who missed a nap. But here's the secret. Check the belt tension and the fluid color first. If that fluid looks like burnt coffee instead of bright red or clear, you're essentially pumping liquid sandpaper through your seals. I once saw a guy replace a whole rack because of a heavy feeling, only to realize his high-pressure hose was collapsing internally. He spent $500 to bypass a $50 hose.
That's a painful lesson. Speaking of sandpaper, let's talk about bearings. I had a wheel bearing go out once, and I thought a propeller plane was following me down the highway.
The classic hum. It's a haunting sound. Bearings are the silent servants until they're not. Whether they're ball bearings or tapered rollers, they're carrying the entire weight of the vehicle while spinning at 1,000 RPMs. When the seals fail and moisture gets in, the race, the smooth track they run on, gets pitted. It looks like the surface of the moon under a microscope.
Is there a Tiger test for detecting a bad bearing before it starts singing to you on the freeway?
Jack it up, grab the tire at 12 and 6 o'clock, and give it a rock. If it clicks or moves, the bearing is toast. If it moves when you grab it at 3 and 9, you're looking at steering linkage. It's like a secret handshake with the car. It'll tell you exactly where it hurts if you know how to shake its hand.
You always make it sound so poetic, a secret handshake. Meanwhile, I'm usually covered in grease and cursing at a bolt that's been rusted shut since the Clinton administration.
Well, the rust is just the car's way of saying it's bonded with the earth. You just have to convince it otherwise with a little heat and some patience. But you mentioned your clunking noise earlier. If we're talking suspension troubleshooting, we have to talk about preloading bushings.
Preloading? That sounds like something I do with my dishwasher.
Not quite. If you replace a control arm or a bushing, a lot of folks tighten the bolts while the car is still up on jacks, with the wheels hanging in the air. That is a massive mistake. When you drop the car back down, the weight twists that brand new rubber bushing into a permanent knot. It'll tear itself to pieces in a month. You have to tighten those bolts only when the car is sitting on its own weight at ride height.
Okay, that's actually a really useful tip. So if I'm DIYing my suspension, I shouldn't finish the job until the car is back on the ground?
Exactly. Either that or use a floor jack to compress the suspension until it just starts to lift off the stand. It's the difference between a job that lasts 10 years and a job that lasts 10 days.
We've talked about the mechanical stuff, the metal and the rubber. But what about the new stuff? The computer-controlled dampers and the steering sensors. Does that change the Tiger test?
It adds a layer of digital mystery, for sure. These days, the car is constantly sniffing the road, adjusting the shocks every few milliseconds. It's incredible technology, but it means a clunk might not be a loose bolt. It might be a dead solenoid or a fouled up height sensor. It's made the backyard mechanic's life harder, but the core principles don't change. Gravity still pulls down and friction still creates heat.
So what's the big takeaway here? If someone's listening and their car is starting to feel a little suggestive in its steering, or they're hearing that skeleton in the trunk noise,
Don't wait for it to get loud. Steering and suspension symptoms start as whispers. A tiny vibration at 60 miles per hour, a slight pull to the left when you hit the brakes, a little extra bounce after a speed bump. These are the car's ways of asking for help before it decides to quit.
and don't forget to check for mud on your rims.
Hey, I'm never living that one down, am I? But seriously, your chassis is your connection to the road. You can have the prettiest paint and the loudest exhaust, but if your tires aren't planted and your steering isn't true, you're just a passenger in a very expensive kinetic sculpture.
Spoken like a man who has wrestled many a greased alligator.
More than I'd like to admit. But there's a real satisfaction in taking a car that feels like a wet noodle and turning it back into a precision machine. It's about restoring the confidence between the driver and the machine. That's why we do this.
Well, I'm going to go shake my car's hand and see if those bearings have anything to say to me.
Just make sure it's on jack stands first, Alex. I don't want to have to write a script about how to troubleshoot a car sitting on your foot.
Deal.